One may begin asking the question, "Where are you? I am in pain." And that might be pushed further, and the person might ask, "For so long I am suffering, where are you? You are seemingly absent in my midst." And if the person would continue to dwell in such a thought, these intrusive thoughts, sooner or later a person may ask, "Are you really there? Are you actually real?" A beautiful Sunday to everyone. Good morning. We will continue with our series entitled Divine Assurance in a Troubled World. And for today's sermon, it is entitled God's Works of Wonder in a Discouraging Time. One day I was walking in the streets of Pueblo, and when suddenly there was an old woman who approached me, and then she said, "Sir, may you please help me?" And so we were standing in front of a restaurant while she was asking something from me. And I became curious of her, and I asked her, "Did you eat already?" She said, "I am actually hungry." So I told the guard of the restaurant, "Would you allow her to get inside? I will invite her for a meal." And the guard said, "If she is with you, we will allow you, sir." So we went inside and have our meal. In the course of our conversation, I noticed that she was really pale, and she was not only pale in her skin, but in her eyes, she was so sad and lonely. So I asked many questions, but one of those questions that I inquired of was, "Where are your children? Do you have children?" And she said with a very sad eyes, "They seem to forget me already. They have their own family. I have a son who lives in Zamboanga City, and I have another son who lives in another city already. But they don't even dare visiting me anymore. So they seem to have forgotten me." My heart was crushed when I heard those words from the old lady. And it's really a sad reality that things like that happened around us. When there is a feeling of abandonment, when there is a feeling of being left behind, where there is a feeling of seemingly forgotten by those whom you love so much. We will look into a psalm that involves such a kind of experience, where the psalmist felt that he was and the entire Israel was abandoned by God. It was a heavy feeling that the psalmist must have experienced. Let's look at this psalm in Psalm 77, verses 1 to 20. And let us discover how are we going to overcome such a situation if a similar condition would happen to us. Psalm 77, 1 to 20. I'll read from the NASB 1995 edition. "My voice rises to God, and I will cry aloud. My voice rises to God, and He will hear me. In the day of my trouble, I sought the Lord. In the night, my hand was stretched out without weariness. My soul refused to be comforted. When I remember God, then I am disturbed. When I sigh, then my spirit grows faint." Selah. "You have held my eyelids open. I am so troubled that I cannot speak. I have considered the days of old, the years of long ago. I will remember my song in the night. I will meditate with my heart, and my spirit ponders. Will the Lord reject forever? And will He never be favorable again? Has His loving kindness ceased forever? Has His promise come to an end forever? Has God forgotten to be gracious, or has he in anger withdrawn his compassion? Selah. Then I said, it is my grief that the right hand of the Most High has changed. I shall remember the deeds of the Lord. Surely I will remember your wonders of old. I will meditate on all your work and muse on your deeds. Your way, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? You are the God who works wonders. You have made known your strength among the peoples. You have by your power redeemed your people, the sons of Jacob and Joseph. Selah. The waters saw you, O God, the waters saw you. They were in anguish. The deeps also trembled. The clouds poured out water. The skies gave forth a sound. Your arrows flashed here and there. The sound of your thunder was in the whirlwind. The lightnings lit up the world. The earth trembled and shook. Your ways was in the sea, and your paths in the mighty waters. And your footprints may not be known. You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. May the good Lord bless the reading of his word. The psalmist went through that moment wherein he felt that God was away. He felt that he was abandoned by the Lord himself. And this is not a strange situation, because this could be a reality in an experience of a believer in our time. This was not an intellectual struggle that the psalmist went through, but this was a relational issue, a relational struggle, as he described it in the earlier verses. Why did I say that this is not an intellectual struggle? Well, the psalmist did not even doubt or question the existence of God. He assumed the existence of God, as clearly he mentioned it in verses 1 and 2. He cried to the Lord, he prayed to the Lord, meaning he knew that God exists. But he was just struggling because in the midst of his situation, seemingly God was silent and God was inactive. A feeling like this may occur when what we know about God is not consistent with what we go through in life. What do I mean by that line? When I say what we know about God is not consistent about what we experience in life, we have known God as the gracious Lord who watches over his children. And yet there are situations in our lives that you and I would go through tough moments. And sometimes these tough moments, the painful situation, wouldn't only be experienced in a short period, but they would last for a long time. Sometimes they are prolonged. Sometimes the agony happened in a longer period. And that's the time when we begin to think, Lord, where are you? What is happening with me? Why do I not see your hands moving in my life and in my family? That was exactly the questioning of the psalmist. He did not question about the existence of God. He knew that God existed. But he was feeling left alone. He was feeling that he was abandoned. He cried to the Lord day and night, as he said here, my voice rises to God, and I will cry aloud. My voice rises to God, and he will hear me. In the day of my trouble, I sought the Lord in the night. My hand was stretched out without weariness. Meaning to say, he prayed day and night. The existence of God wasn't questioned, but it was the inactivity of God in his life. That was the thing that he was asking about. Lord, I knew that you are real. I knew that you hear me, but why are you not moving in my life this time? My agony is prolonged. My pain is so heavy already. They were in exile. As I have told you last Sunday, the background situation of Psalm 77 is the same as the background situation of the Psalm that I talked about last Sunday. The exile. How long did the exile happen? As I mentioned last Sunday, 70 years. For 70 years, that was a long span of time wherein people were there experiencing a difficult moment in life. When the agony, when the pain is prolonged, seemingly the Christians would begin thinking of matters like this. We feel abandoned. We feel left behind or left alone. We feel that God is inactive. This kind of anguish is expressed further when you look at verses 7 to 9, when the psalmist expressed his feelings in a form of rhetorical questions. Look at verse 7. This is what he asks. Will the Lord reject forever? And will he never be favorable again? Verse 8. Has his loving kindness ceased forever? Has his promise come to an end forever? Has God forgotten to be gracious, or has his anger withdrawn his compassion? He used terms that were used to be present in the lives of the believers or the Israelites in relation to God. Like, for example, the word loving kindness. This is a word in Hebrew, it's hesed, wherein it is used by the Lord to describe on how he relates with the Israelites, how he relates with the people within the covenant with him, within an agreement with him. So this is a unique way of relating that God uses in relation to his people. And the psalmist is asking now, where is your loving kindness? Where is the hesed? We've been here for so long and we are in need of your intervention. Where are you, O Lord? We need your help for so long already. And you know what happens? These are intrusive thoughts that may set into our hearts. And when all of this kind of thinking would dwell in us and us dwelling in them, the possibility is that one step at a time, they will draw us away from God. One may begin asking the question, where are you? I am in pain. And that might be pushed further, and the person might ask, for so long I am suffering, where are you? You are seemingly absent in my midst. And if the person would continue to dwell in such a thought, these intrusive thoughts, sooner or later a person may ask, are you really there? Are you actually real? This could be a kind of question that would set into the heart and mind of every individual who even follow God. And that has to be stopped. The psalmist made a decision. I shall stop this kind of thinking. In verses 10 and 11, these two verses became the pivotal point in this song. Verses 1 to 9, he expressed his anguish literally and rhetorically. But in verses 10 to 11, there was a twist in his condition because of these pivotal statements that he uttered, and he followed this. And I want us to take note very carefully of verses 10 and to 11, because this would be helping us a lot when we are in such a kind of situation where we are experiencing a prolonged agony, a sustained pain in life, a situation that we've been asking God, Lord, take us away from this situation. Please remove this kind of pain in our lives, and yet it remained to be there for so long. If you've been praying for so long, your mind might begin to entertain the intrusive thoughts that God is absent, that God is not working and he doesn't care about you. The psalmist, before he went far away from God, he said, I have to stop this. You look at verse 10, this is what he said in the Nasby version. It is my grief that the right hand of the Most High has changed. Well, the English is not smooth in Nasby 1995 edition. Let's see how the NET or New English Translation render this line. And in English, NET, New English Translation, it translated the Hebrew language in this line. I am sickened by the thought that the Sovereign One might become inactive. I am sickened by the thought that the sovereign one might become inactive, because that's what he was thinking about. For so long they were suffering there in the exile, and they began thinking, he is inactive, he is not moving. And before they went even further away, the psalmist made a decision, I have to stop this. I have to stop this. Because once the person goes so far away and he begins denying the existence of God, even if he had experiences of good things, he could not come back anymore. And so this guy said, I had to stop these thoughts, the intrusive thoughts that is trying to destroy that my God is at work. He said, I have to stop this. And how did he do that? Verse 11 would give us an answer. Verse 11 said, I shall remember the deeds of the Lord. Surely I will remember your wonders of old. I shall remember the deeds of the Lord. Surely I will remember your deeds in the old. The psalmist, when he looked around him, he was saying, I cannot see the hand of God moving. I don't feel that He is at work in our lives today. I cannot even sense His presence. But he said, Lord, I may not see your hands moving today. I may not feel your presence in our midst, but I will choose to remember how you displayed your life in the past, how you work in our past, because they are concrete. I may not feel you right now, but I knew you are real and I know you are working because you did these things in the past. Here is the thing. We may feel abandoned at some point. We may feel that God is not caring anymore. We may not see His hands moving right at that moment. How do we help ourselves from drifting away from the faith? We make ourselves remember what God did in the past. And if I am going to give you the chance to speak about the past, on how God revealed Himself to you, each one of us has his own experience. Each one of us. No doubt about that matter. We experience at some point in life that God led us to something, and you and I are able to say, God is at work. And if there is nothing that you could see as traces of His hand in our time, there are traces of His hands in the past. Go back and dwell and remember all those things. And they will make your heart alive again. After which the psalmist had a change of thoughts. That is why when you look at verses 12 to 13, he talked about remembering the God who works mysteriously. And in this kind of works that God did in verses 12 and 13, he described Him as the holy God who worked things out in the past. Let's read those verses 12 and 13. I will meditate on all your work and muse on your deeds. Your way, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? There is a change now of the mood. There is a change of emotions right now. There is now a different kind of tone with the words that he was saying. Why? Because instead of dwelling on the thoughts, the intrusive thoughts that God is inactive, that God doesn't care, he started remembering what God did in the past. Those were undeniable experiences. Verses 14 up to 15, he said, you are the God who works wonders. You have made known your strength among the peoples. You have by your power redeemed your people, the sons of Jacob and Joseph. All of this were experiences of redemption by God's children. Verses 16 to 19, it spoke about God's power displayed in the lives of the Israelites by showing to them that His authority and power goes beyond the power of nature. Verses 16 to 19, it says here, the waters saw you, O God. The waters saw you. They were in anguish. The deeps also trembled. The clouds poured out. And then he said, the skies gave forth a sound. Your arrows flashed here and there. The sound of your thunder was in the whirlwind. The lightnings lit up the world. The earth trembled and shook. Your way was in the sea, and your paths in the mighty waters, and the footprints may not be known. All of these descriptions, the psalmist is saying, Lord, you have wonderful works in the past. In particular, what were the situations? He was talking about the experiences of the Israelites as they journeyed from Egypt to Canaan. In that kind of journey, God showed to them that He led them in an extraordinary manner, led by a pillar of cloud during the day, a pillar of cloud during the night, a sea that was parted. They walked through it. There were no traces that were left. All of these powerful scenarios that God displayed in the lives of His children were remembered by the psalmist. And then lastly, he concretely mentioned two names in verse 20. You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. Again, he was looking back to the Exodus experience. And in all those experiences that were uttered, God concretely displayed Himself. Yes, he felt abandoned. He felt left alone. He felt discouraged about his situation. But the psalmist made a decision. I am sick and tired of thinking about these intrusive thoughts, about the inactivity of God. I shall remind myself of who my God is, of who He is. And how did he do that? By recalling what God did in the past. And that's something that you and I may also do in life. Because there will be time in your life that you would feel you are abandoned, left alone, and God doesn't care anymore. Time like that would come when you are in a hospital or you are watching over someone, a patient who has been there for so long, and you've been praying for healing, and yet healing is not transpiring. When you are praying for someone that person would be delivered from death, and yet for so long you have been praying, death still came. When your family is suffering from poverty and you've been praying to the Lord, Lord, help us alleviate our condition from this kind of situation, O Lord, and yet you remain in that kind of man until now. And when that continues, intrusive thoughts would set in. God is not at work. God is inactive. We have to remind ourselves by remembering what God did in the past. One of those things that I am often amazed when I remember was the pandemic period. The fact that you are here today, God preserved you. And I am so fascinated to think that there were many individuals that talked to me. They said, we experienced the pandemic and yet we experienced abundance even in those years. Why do I believe that? Here is the thing. 2022, 23, 24, and 25. We are in the 2025. Now, within 22, 23, 24, those 3 years, 23, there was no more much of it. Traces of pandemics are still there. 2022 and 2023, that was, traces of pandemic are left, are few. But if you look at the record of the giving in the church, it was in those years, 21, 22, 23, when we have much for the work of God. Where did they come from? They came from God's people. Where did God's people get them during the pandemic? It only testifies that God has been providing even in those times. Think of that. And when we go through challenging moments in the current time, think of those years. How did I survive? How did God sustain me? I am still here. And that should be enough to lift our hearts again. To say, Lord, I know you are at work. The song that we sang earlier, it concretely tells us the reality. Even if I don't see your hand working, I believe you are working. Even if I don't feel it, I believe you are doing something. We have to remember what God did in the past. Let me relate to you this poem that was written by Paul Ray. He said, since storms will come and winds will blow, since people die and conflicts grow, since plans will fail and leaves turn brown, and friends will sometimes let you down, remember who gives life and death and loved us with his dying breath. Since stocks will crash and chairmen lie, since cancer kills and crimes too high, since greed lives on and gang wars kill, and marriages are failing still, remember Christ with insults hurled, who hung with thieves to save the world. Since children starve and mothers grieve, since soldiers hurt and teens conceive, since some will cheat and some don't care, and wars leave scars that all must bear, remember Christ whose blood was shed, who came to save us from the dead. So don't give up and don't give in. Remember Christ who cleansed our sin. This world's a sick and wretched place. So share God's love and show God's grace. Keep loving and forget not the past, since those in Christ are free at last. Of all the incidents in the past, one of the greatest things that you and I shall remember is the cross of Christ. When Christ came in this world and suffered on our behalf, clothes were taken away from his body. He was hung on the cross with hands to the left and right, widely opened. He became a spectacle before a crowd, a spectacle of shame, degradation, and punishment. And yet Christ took them all. He took the shame, he took the pain, and said, I love you this much. You are crucifying me. You are gonna kill me. But I'm gonna do this because I will never abandon you. The cross would tell us that even in the toughest moment of life, in the greatest problem that humankind experienced, which is the problem of sin, God never abandoned. And so when you feel that God is abandoning you, when you feel that God doesn't care anymore, when you feel that God doesn't manifest his presence, remind yourself, let us remember what God has done in the past. They will strengthen us to rise up again and take some simple steps of faith that we may move forward in faith one more time in God. So with that, it is my prayer. I may not know what you are going through right now, but I believe it's going to encourage our hearts when we begin remembering what God has done in the past. Yes, as the psalmist said it, Lord, I cannot trace your hand today. I do not see your presence in our midst today, but I will choose to remember what you did in the past, because I believe they will remind me of your reality, that you are continually at work, even if I don't see it, even if I don't feel it. With that, may the word of God bless our hearts and encourage each one, even in the toughest moment of our experiences. God bless you all, and good morning.